perfume lingers. It always does. Even when you think you've washed it away, traces cling to fabric like guilty fingerprints. The scent on Mark's collar wasn't mine, a sickly sweet jasmine that made my stomach turn. I held the shirt closer, inhaling deeply, making absolutely certain. No mistake. This wasn't my signature vanilla and amber. I'm Jane, and until this moment, I thought I knew exactly who I was: successful businesswoman, devoted wife. Daughter of David Mitchell, who built Mitchell Trading from nothing. Funny how one small detail can shatter everything you believe about your life. "Honey, have you seen my blue tie?" Mark called from upstairs. "The one with the diagonal stripes." My fingers tightened around the shirt. "Check the back of the closet door," I answered, keeping my voice steady. "You wore it last week to the Henderson meeting." "Got it." His footsteps echoed above, followed by the sound of drawers opening and closing. I carefully placed the shirt back in the laundry basket, arranging it exactly as I'd found it. My hands were trembling. The rational part of my brain tried to construct innocent explanations: a colleague's perfume from a casual hug, perhaps. But my gut knew better. After 12 years of marriage, you develop a sixth sense about these things. Mark appeared in the doorway, adjusting his tie. "How do I look?" I turned to face him, studying the man I'd pledged my life to. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his smile confident and warm. He looked exactly like the man I married, and somehow like a complete stranger. "Very handsome," I said, forcing a smile. "Important meeting today?" "Just the usual client lunch. Probably won't be back until late." He grabbed his briefcase from the counter. "Don't wait up if you're tired." As he leaned in to kiss my cheek, I caught another whiff of that jasmine scent, so faint it was almost imperceptible. My stomach clenched. "Have a good day," I managed. The moment the front door closed, I pulled out my phone and called the office. "Sandra, it's Jane. I'm not feeling well, might take a personal day." "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. Should I reschedule your afternoon appointments?" "Please." "And Sandra? If my father asks, tell him I'll catch up on everything tomorrow." I ended the call and sank into a kitchen chair, my mind racing. The perfume was just the latest piece of a puzzle I'd been subconsciously assembling for weeks. The late meetings. The guarded phone calls. The way he'd grown distant, distracted. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel: "Lunch today. Need to talk about something." Rachel, my best friend since high school. The one person I could always count on. I started to type a response, then stopped. Something about her message felt off. Rachel never needed to talk, she just talked. I opened our text history, scrolling through recent conversations. The patterns jumped out at me now: her sudden cancellations, vague explanations, decreased enthusiasm in our usual banter. How had I missed it? My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I considered my response. Every instinct screamed that I was standing on the edge of something devastating. But if I wanted answers, I needed to play this carefully. "Sorry, not feeling great today. Rain check." I typed, then added a sick emoji for good measure. Her response came quickly: "No problem. Feel better." Red heart. Too quickly. Too cheerful. The heart emoji felt like a slap. I set my phone down and walked to the window, watching Mark's car disappear around the corner. The morning sun cast long shadows across our perfectly manicured lawn, highlighting the life we'd built together. Or rather, the life I thought we'd built. One thing was certain: I needed proof. And once I had it, someone would pay. 3 days after finding that perfume, I sat at my father's mahogany dining table, watching my husband laugh at something Rachel had just whispered. The sound grated against my nerves like steel on glass. "More wine, Jane?" My father held up a bottle of his prized Bordeaux. Please. I pushed my glass forward, noting how Rachel's eyes followed the movement. She'd been watching me all evening, her usual warmth replaced by something calculating. Lori bounced little Eli on her knee at the other end of the table. Mark, you haven't told Jane about the promotion yet, have you? My hand froze mid-reach for my wine glass. What promotion? Mark's laugh died abruptly. He shot his sister a look that could have frozen hell. I was waiting for the right moment. It's not final yet. Oh. Rachel's voice carried a note of false surprise. I thought you said it was a done deal last week when She stopped herself, taking a large sip of wine. The room grew painfully quiet. I could hear the tick of my father's antique clock, marking each second of this exquisite torture. When you what, Rachel? I kept my tone light, casual. The perfect concerned friend. When we ran into each other at Starbucks, she finished smoothly. Just a quick hello between meetings. My father cleared his throat. Speaking of business, Mark, those quarterly reports need reviewing before Monday. Perhaps you could come in early. Actually, Mark shifted in his chair, I have a breakfast meeting with clients. Cancel it, my father said flatly. The steel in his voice made everyone look up. David Mitchell didn't suggest things, he commanded them. I watched Mark's jaw tighten. Of course, sir. Lori stood suddenly, Eli squirming in her arms. Someone needs a diaper change. Jane, would you mind showing me where? Use the guest bathroom upstairs, I said, not taking my eyes off Mark and Rachel. Second door on the right. The moment Lori left, Rachel pushed back her chair. I should probably head out. Early morning tomorrow. But you haven't had dessert, I protested. I made your favorite, chocolate soufflé. Rachel hesitated, her hand clutching her purse. Another time. Stay. Mark's voice was too eager, too insistent. He caught himself and added, we hardly see you anymore. I watched the silent communication pass between them, the slight shake of Rachel's head, the tightening around Mark's eyes. How long had I been blind to this dance? Rachel. My father's voice cut through the tension. Before you go, I wanted to ask about that charity gala you're organizing. The one next month. Oh, yes. Rachel sank back into her chair, trapped by courtesy. We're still finalizing the details. Excellent. Jane will be handling the firm's donation this year. Perhaps you two should coordinate. I smiled at Rachel, all teeth. We should definitely meet up to discuss it. Just the two of us. The color drained from her face. That would be nice. Mark's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then quickly turned it face down. But not before I caught the flash of an incoming message notification. Important client? I asked innocently. Just spam, he muttered. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of forced small talk and careful avoidance. When Rachel finally left, Mark insisted on walking her to her car. I watched from the window as they stood too close, speaking in urgent whispers. You see it too, don't you? My father's voice startled me. I turned to find him studying me with those shrewd eyes that had built an empire. See what? He took a slow sip of his Bordeaux. I didn't build this family's success by being blind to betrayal, Jane. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What would you do? His smile was cold. I'd remember that revenge, like fine wine, is best served at precisely the right temperature. Too hot, and you lose the subtleties. Too cold, and you miss the full impact. I heard Mark's footsteps approaching. My father squeezed my shoulder and whispered, choose your moment carefully, daughter. But when you strike, make it count. That night, I lay awake listening to Mark's steady breathing beside me, planning my next move. Tomorrow, I decided, I would start following him. Sometimes the only way to expose a snake is to track it to its nest. The Monarch Bar was exactly the kind of place Rachel would choose, all crystal chandeliers and velvet booths, trying too hard to be sophisticated. From my position at the corner table, partially hidden behind a massive floral arrangement, I had a perfect view of the entrance. Mark had told me he was working late. Again. But his car wasn't in the office parking lot when I drove past at 7. Now, watching him walk through those ornate doors at 8:15, I felt my wedding ring grow heavy on my finger. He didn't even look around before sliding into a booth near the back. Waiting. I ordered another club soda and watched the minutes tick by on my phone. At 8:30 exactly, Rachel walked in. She'd changed since the office, traded her usual conservative blazer for a black dress that showed more skin than it covered. The jasmine perfume probably came with it. My fingers tightened around my glass as she slipped into Mark's booth. They didn't kiss. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they leaned close, heads bent together like conspirators. His hand disappeared under the table. Rachel laughed, that throaty laugh she reserved for men she wanted to impress. The waiter appeared at my table. "Another club soda, ma'am." "No." I stood, dropping cash on the table. "But I'd like you to deliver something to that couple in the corner booth." 5 minutes later, I watched the waiter place a champagne bottle at their table. Mark's face lit up until he read the note I'd attached. "Congratulations on the promotion. Love, Jane." The color drained from both their faces. Rachel knocked over her wine glass, reaching for her purse. Mark's head whipped around, scanning the bar. But I was already walking toward them, calm as still water. "Don't get up," I said, sliding into their booth. "You both look so comfortable." "Jane," Rachel started. "Shut up." My voice was ice. "I've known you since we were 15, Rachel. 15 years of secrets and sleepovers and supporting each other through every crisis. And this is how you repay that loyalty." Mark tried to take my hand. "This isn't what you think." I yanked away. "Really? Because I think my husband and my best friend have been fucking behind my back. Am I wrong?" The silence was answer enough. "How long?" Rachel stared at her spilled wine, watching it seep into the white tablecloth. 6 months. The number hit me like a physical blow. 6 months. Half a year of lies. Of family dinners and girls' nights and casual texts. Of Rachel asking about my marriage, pretending to care while she destroyed it. "I never meant," Rachel's voice cracked. "To what? Get caught?" I leaned forward. "Or did you never mean to want everything I have? My husband, my family's connections, my life?" "That's not fair," she whispered. "Fair?" I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make nearby diners turn. "Was it fair when you helped me pick out anniversary gifts for Mark? When you held my hand at my mother's funeral? When you stood beside me at my wedding as my maid of honor?" Mark touched my shoulder. "Jane, please. People are staring. Let them." I shrugged off his hand. "Let them see exactly who you both are." Rachel was crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Keep your sorry." I stood, smoothing my dress. "But know this, I'm not done. Not even close. You both seem to have forgotten who I am, who my family is. That was your first mistake. What are you going to do?" Mark's voice held an edge of panic. I smiled, the same smile my father used before destroying his competitors. "Nothing yet. But I want you both to remember this feeling, this moment of knowing I could ruin you, and not knowing when it's coming. Consider it foreplay. I turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Rachel. That perfume you're wearing. It's cheap. Like everything else about you. Walking out of the Monarch bar, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Let them sweat, let them wonder what I'd do next. My father was right, revenge, like fine wine, needs time to breathe. My phone buzzed, a text from Rachel, "Please, can we talk?" I deleted it without responding. The time for talking was over. Now it was time to plan. The burner phone slipped from my trembling fingers, clattering onto Mark's pristine car floor mats. I'd found it tucked behind the spare tire while pretending to look for a missing earring, an old trick my father taught me about searching competitors' offices. Always have a plausible excuse. 217 messages. Dozens of photos. 6 months of digital betrayal, wrapped in a cheap black plastic case. Mrs. Mitchell. Garcia, our security guard, tapped on the garage window. Everything all right? The cameras showed you'd been down here a while. I pocketed the phone. Just being thorough about that earring. It was my grandmother's. His expression softened. Want me to help look? No need. I locked Mark's car. Some things are meant to stay lost. Upstairs in my office, I closed the blinds and scrolled through the messages. Each one felt like swallowing broken glass. Rachel, missing you already. Last night was incredible. Mark, can't stop thinking about that thing you do with your tongue. Rachel, Jane suspects nothing. She actually asked me to help plan your anniversary party. Mark, you're so much more exciting than her. She's become boring. Predictable. My finger hovered over the call button to my father's private investigator. One call, and I could have a full dossier on their every movement. But that would mean admitting this betrayal to my father, watching pity replace pride in his eyes. My office phone buzzed. Mrs. Mitchell. Your sister-in-law is here. Lori stood in my doorway, Eli balanced on her hip. Her eyes were red-rimmed. I need to tell you something. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, keeping the burner phone hidden in my lap. What's wrong? I saw them. She bounced Eli nervously. Mark and Rachel. At the lake house last weekend. The lake house. My sanctuary. The place where Mark and I had spent our honeymoon. When Mark said he was helping me with Eli's custody paperwork. Lori's voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Jane. I should have told you sooner. How long have you known? 3 months. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Mark said he'd help with my legal fees if I kept quiet. I needed the money, but I can't. I can't sleep anymore. I stood, walking to the window. Below, downtown traffic crawled through the afternoon heat. Does anyone else know? Just Rachel's brother. He caught them at some hotel last month. Of course. The web of lies and silence spreads like cancer, corrupting everything it touches. What are you going to do? Lori asked. I turned back to her, decision crystallizing. Nothing. Yet. But. Take Eli home, Lori. Forget we had this conversation. After she left, I pulled up the company's financial records. Mark's recent promotion had given him access to significant accounts. If I knew my husband, and I did, better than he thought, he'd have gotten sloppy with the money too. 3 hours later, I had what I needed. Expensive hotel charges masked as business meetings. Cash withdrawals from company accounts. Rachel's charity foundation suddenly receiving generous anonymous donations. My father's voice came from the doorway. Found what you were looking for. I didn't bother hiding the screens. How long have you known? About the affair or the embezzlement? Both. He settled into Laurie's vacated chair. Long enough to know you'd figure it out yourself. The question is, what's your next move? I held up the burner phone. I have evidence of the affair. And now proof he's stealing from the company. Be careful, Jane. Revenge is like a double-edged sword. I learned from the best. I met his gaze. Remember Carlton Industries? A smile tugged at his lips. Carlton Industries, our biggest competitor until my father discovered their CEO's gambling addiction. He didn't just destroy the company, he made sure everyone knew exactly why it fell. The board meets next week, I said. Mark's presenting the quarterly reports. My father nodded slowly. Perfect timing for some discrepancies to come to light. I slipped the burner phone back into my pocket. I think it's time Rachel and Mark learned what happens when you betray a Mitchell. The sword was drawn. Now I just had to decide where to strike first. My mother's antique serving dishes gleamed under the dining room lights as I arranged them perfectly on the table. The annual Mitchell family dinner, traditionally a celebration of the firm's success, would serve a different purpose this year. The flowers look lovely, Mark said from the doorway, adjusting his tie. You've outdone yourself. I centered a crystal vase filled with white lilies, Rachel's favorite. I wanted everything to be memorable. The doorbell rang. Mark moved to answer it, but I stopped him. Let me. You should check the wine cellar, make sure the Bordeaux is breathing properly. Rachel stood on the doorstep, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost 3 months' salary. Her smile faltered when she saw me. Jane, I've been trying to reach you. Come in. I stepped aside. Everyone's looking forward to your presentation about the charity foundation. She paled slightly. Presentation? Didn't Mark tell you? The board wants to hear about where their donations are going. The next hour was a symphony of arrivals, board members, their spouses, my father with his trademark scrutinizing gaze. Laurie came without Eli, her eyes darting nervously between Mark and me. During cocktails, I watched Rachel touch Mark's arm 3 times. He checked his phone 12 times. Both jumped when my father clinked his glass for attention. Before dinner, he announced, I'd like to address some business matters. Mark, you have the quarterly reports. Mark straightened his jacket. Of course, sir. Though perhaps we could wait until. Actually, I interrupted, I have something to share first. I retrieved a folder from my study. Some interesting discrepancies came to light during my review. Rachel's wine glass trembled slightly. Mark's confident smile cracked at the edges. It seems, I continued, that several large donations to a certain charity foundation came directly from company accounts. Unauthorized transfers, cleverly disguised as business expenses. The room grew silent. My father's expression hardened as I laid out photocopied bank statements and hotel receipts. Jane, Mark started, there's a perfectly reasonable. I'm not finished. I pulled out the burner phone. I also found this. The messages are enlightening. Especially the ones about the lake house. Rachel stood abruptly. I should go. Sit down. My father's voice could have frozen hell. Both of you will hear this out. I played selected messages through the room's speakers. Mark and Rachel's intimate exchanges echoed off the walls, each word a nail in their coffins. Board members shifted uncomfortably. Someone's wife gasped. 6 months, I said, my voice steady. 6 months of betrayal, theft, and lies. From my husband and my best friend. Please, Rachel whispered, mascara tracking down her cheeks. We never meant to get caught. To destroy everything my family built. I turned to the board members. The foundation is a shell. They've been embezzling your donations, using company money to fund their affair. Mark lunged for the folder. You can't prove. My father's hand clamped on his shoulder. Actually, she can. The SEC will be very interested in these records. You're bluffing, Mark snarled. You wouldn't risk the scandal. I smiled, my father's smile, the one that preceded destruction. Try me. The Mitchell name will survive. Will yours? Rachel broke first, crumpling into her chair. I'll resign. Pay everything back. Just please. Too late. I placed a final document on the table. The police have already been notified about the financial fraud. And Mark? I've filed for divorce. Your things are packed in the garage. The room erupted in chaos. Board members demanded explanations. Mark shouted about betrayal, rich, coming from him. Rachel fled, heels clicking on marble. Through it all, I remained standing, watching my carefully orchestrated destruction unfold. My father caught my eye across the room, nodding slightly. Proud. Later, after everyone left, I sat alone at the empty table. The lilies were wilting, their sweet scent turning sour. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. I never wanted your life. I just wanted to matter like you do. I deleted it without responding. Some things, once broken, can never be repaired. And some betrayals deserve no mercy. Tomorrow, the real damage would begin. Tonight, I would sleep soundly, knowing I'd chosen my moment perfectly. The morning after the dinner party, I walked into my office to find Mark waiting. His eyes were bloodshot, his expensive suit wrinkled. The Wall Street Journal lay open on my desk, our company's scandal already making headlines. You've destroyed everything, he said quietly. Was revenge worth it? I moved to my chair, noting how he flinched when I passed. Funny. I was about to ask you the same thing. The SEC is freezing my accounts. Rachel's foundation is being investigated. Her brother lost his job because of the connection. He leaned forward. You didn't just burn us, you torched everyone around us. Collateral damage. The words tasted bitter. Like what you did to Lori and Eli. His laugh was hollow. At least I helped them. What have you done except prove you're exactly like your father? Cold. Calculating. Willing to sacrifice anyone for the sake of winning. The truth in his words stung more than I expected. My phone buzzed, another message from Rachel's mother, begging me to drop the charges. I'd gotten 12 similar ones since dawn. You want to talk about sacrifice? I pulled up the security footage from the lake house. Let's discuss what you did in my mother's bed. The one she died in. Color drained from his face. How did you? I had cameras installed everywhere after she passed. To preserve memories, I told myself. I played the clip, muting the sound. Imagine my surprise when I found these. He lunged across the desk, knocking over my coffee. You vindictive bitch. Security burst in, restraining him. My father appeared in the doorway, his expression thunderous. Get him out. And make sure he doesn't leave town, the police have more questions. After they dragged Mark away, my father studied me. You look terrible. Thanks. The board's calling an emergency meeting. There's concern about how this affects the firm's reputation. I straightened papers Mark had scattered. We'll weather it. Jane. His tone made me look up. Some board members think we should distance ourselves from the scandal. They're suggesting you take a leave of absence. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. You agreed. I abstained from the vote. But they're right, we need to protect the firm. The firm I just protected by exposing fraud. The firm you exposed to public scrutiny. He sighed. Sometimes winning the battle costs you the war. My phone buzzed again. Lori, they're taking Eli. Mark's charges mean I lose custody to his father. Please help. The walls seemed to close in. Everything I'd done to protect my family, my legacy, was unraveling. I'd wanted justice, but at what cost? Rachel's brother, unemployed. Eli, losing his mother. The firm I'd given everything to, now turning its back. Even my father's carefully neutral expression felt like abandonment. Take the leave, he said softly. Let things cool down. We'll weather this, like we always do. We? I stood, suddenly unable to breathe. There is no we. There never was. It was always about the firm, wasn't it? About appearances. Jane. Get out. When he didn't move, I hurled my coffee mug at the wall. Get out. Alone in my office, I watched headlines scroll across my screen. The scandal was spreading, consuming everything in its path. My phone kept buzzing, pleas, threats, accusations. Each message a reminder of lives I'd helped destroy. Rachel's last text flashed, I hope it was worth it. We all lost everything, but you lost yourself. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window, perfectly styled hair, designer suit, Mitchell family steel in my spine. The image blurred as tears finally came. I'd won. I'd destroyed them all. But standing in my empty office, watching my carefully constructed world crumble, I realized Rachel was right. In becoming my father's daughter, in choosing revenge over mercy, I'd lost something essential. Something that no amount of justice could restore. The sun set over the city skyline, casting long shadows across my empire of ashes. Tomorrow, I'd have to face the consequences. Tonight, I let myself mourn everything I'd sacrificed at the altar of revenge. The lake house looked smaller in the rain. Rachel sat on the covered porch, her designer clothes replaced by jeans and an old sweater. She didn't look surprised to see me. I wondered when you'd come, she said. I held up the envelope that had arrived that morning. Your letter was unexpected. Did you read it? Every word. I settled into the chair opposite her, watching raindrops hit the lake. 15 pages of explanation. Or justification, depending on how you look at it. She wrapped her arms around herself. Mark's being sentenced tomorrow. 5 years, probably less with good behavior. The SEC was thorough. And me? The foundation's assets are frozen. But since you're cooperating, I let the sentence hang. Lightning flashed across the water. Rachel flinched. I used to envy how you never showed fear. Even in high school, you were always so certain. Appearances. I pulled out my phone, showing her the security footage. The lake house cameras caught everything. Including the night you both came here after my mother's funeral. Her face crumpled. Jane. I watched it all. Every visit. Every time you played house in my family's sanctuary. My voice remained steady. You wore my mother's robe. The blue silk one she loved. I didn't know. You knew exactly what you were doing. Both of you. I stood, walking to the railing. What I can't figure out is why. Was it just about hurting me? Or did you really think you could replace me? I wanted to be you. The words exploded from her. Perfect Jane Mitchell, with her perfect life and perfect family. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow? Being the friend who's never quite good enough. So you fucked my husband. Stole from my family. That was your solution. Mark understood. He felt it too, never measuring up to the Mitchell standard. She laughed bitterly. We were both tired of being supporting characters in the Jane Mitchell show. Supporting characters. I turned slowly. You were my best friend. My sister in everything but blood. I trusted you with everything. Everything except the truth. About who you really are, what your family really does. She stood, anger finally breaking through her guilt. Your father destroyed my brother's career years ago. Did you know that? Of course not. The Mitchells don't discuss their casualties. The revelation hit like ice water. What? Ask your father about Carlton Industries. About why my brother really left finance. Her hands shook. Mark and I. We thought we could beat you at your own game. Take something from the Mitchells for once. Understanding dawned, bitter and cold. So this wasn't just an affair. It was revenge. Does it matter anymore? We all lost. She pulled out a familiar key, my mother's spare. Here. I won't need it where I'm going. Where's that? Away. Far from here. From you. She stepped past me, pausing at the stairs. You won, Jane. Just like a Mitchell always does. I hope it fills whatever emptiness drives you. I caught her arm. Rachel. What? I loved you. Despite everything, you were family. That's the problem with Mitchells. She gently pulled away. Your love comes with too high a price. I watched her walk to her car, disappearing into the rain. The key felt heavy in my hand, my mother's key, witness to so many betrayals. Inside, the lake house still held echoes of the past. Photos on the walls, memories of happier times. I traced my mother's face behind the glass. My phone buzzed, my father. I let it ring. Some victories feel like defeats. Some revenge leaves wounds that never heal. Standing in my mother's house, surrounded by ghosts of trust and friendship, I finally understood the true cost of being a Mitchell. Tomorrow, Mark would face justice. Rachel would disappear. The firm would survive, as it always did. But something had shifted, something fundamental and irreversible. I placed my mother's key on the mantel, next to her photo. Then I walked out, leaving the past locked behind me. It was time to write my own story, one where victory didn't require destroying everything I loved. The rain had stopped. Ahead, the road stretched into darkness, full of possibilities and second chances. I drove toward it, finally ready to find out who Jane Mitchell could be without the weight of revenge. The divorce papers lay unsigned on my desk, Mark's empty signature line a final act of defiance. Through my office window, I watched movers empty his corner office, another Mitchell legacy stripped bare. My father's reflection appeared in the glass. The board voted. You're officially CEO. And you're officially retired. I didn't turn around. Was that always the plan? Let me destroy my marriage, my friendships, just to prove I could be ruthless enough for the position. You proved you're a Mitchell. He moved beside me. Though perhaps a different kind than I expected. On my desk, a newspaper showed Rachel's foundation being dissolved, its remaining assets distributed to legitimate charities. Another showed Mark entering prison. Victory, by any measure. I found the Carlton Industries files, I said. Rachel's brother wasn't the only casualty of our family's success, was he? My father's silence was answer enough. I'm restructuring the firm. I finally faced him. Starting with full audits of all our past acquisitions. Restitution where necessary. That could cost millions. Then it costs millions. He studied me with new eyes. You're not just changing the firm. You're changing what it means to be a Mitchell. Someone has to. My phone buzzed, Lori. She'd accepted my offer to head our new charitable foundation, using her legal background to help families like her own. Eli would stay with her, thanks to some carefully applied Mitchell influence in the right courts. The board won't like these changes, my father warned. The board works for me now. I handed him a file. Starting with this, we're helping Rachel's brother restart his investment firm. Privately, anonymously. Conscience doesn't build empires. No, but it might help me sleep at night. I picked up my pen, signing the divorce papers with swift strokes. Besides, isn't that what you taught me? The long game matters more than quick victories. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Your mother would be proud. She always said you'd find your own way. She also said revenge was a poison. I touched the photo on my desk, Mom at the lake house, laughing. I just didn't understand what she meant until now. My father moved to leave, then paused. The lake house. What will you do with it? Sell it. Use the money to start a scholarship fund in Mom's name. I met his eyes. Some places should stay in the past. After he left, I opened my drawer, pulling out Rachel's letter. Her last words still haunted me. We were both prisoners of the Mitchell name, just in different ways. I hope you find freedom from it, Jane. I finally have. The city stretched before me, its skyline dotted with buildings bearing our name. But for the first time, I saw beyond the empire, beyond the legacy of power and revenge that had shaped us all. My assistant knocked. Your next appointment is here. The Carlton Industries Survivors Fund. Send them in. I slipped Rachel's letter into my shredder, watching the past dissolve into confetti. The Mitchell name would continue. The firm would prosper. But perhaps success didn't have to mean destruction. Perhaps power could build instead of break. I touched my mother's photo one last time, then turned to face my visitors. Their stories needed hearing. Their wounds needed healing. And I needed to prove that a Mitchell could be more than just a name to fear. Outside, the sun broke through clouds, casting long shadows across the city. Somewhere, Rachel was starting over. Mark was facing his consequences. And I was finally writing my own definition of victory. The future stretched before me, uncertain but full of possibility. I'd learned the true price of revenge, and chosen a different path. Now it was time to see where it led. Welcome, I said to my visitors. Let's talk about making things right.